Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Fleet Geeks podcast. My microphone, can you hear me okay? My microphone literally just decided to go bosh like that and tightened it up properly. Okay, brilliant. There's probably a story in there somewhere about checking things. Anyway, I'm joined today by Tom. I can't believe how I'm waffling. I'm so pleased to have Tom Reddy joining me today. Tom is a consummate professional in the transport industry, someone who I admire greatly. And some people may feel like I'm laying it on a bit thick, but I genuinely mean it. Tom gives up, a lot of time to mentor and support transport managers on their journey. I know you train transport manager CPC, but I also think that you're one of the few people in the industry who are willing to go over and above to help support people. So I just want to commend you for that, really, Tom, actually publicly. So I really appreciate it. And I was really shocked. I was really shocked when I learned that you were going to PI, for example. I was really, really surprised. But what I also thought was that I knew there'd be lots of opportunities to learn and there'd be a lot of insight for you to share as well, which I'm really pleased you're willing to help support and contribute to. Tom, just for the benefit of the listeners, would you mind just introducing yourself? I know I've just hammed you up a bit and you'll probably feel quite uncomfortable, so apologies. But could you just introduce yourself for the benefit of the listeners, tell them a little bit about what you do and that kind of thing?
Yeah, of course, Pete. Obviously, we've worked together quite a long time now with various projects, but my role up to this point has been transport manager. So I've been an internal and an external transport manager. This has made me have a bit of a rethink on what my approach is going to be, but I also work as a consultant and a trainer as well. So I teach the transport manager CPC, and I'm helping operators in this position. But this one was different this time because it was involving an operator I'm directly responsible for and myself. So it was a bit of an interesting switch round.
Appreciate that, Tom. So to start with, could you tell us the background as to why you were called to a public inquiry?
Sure. So on one of our vehicles in October 2024, we had a roadside encounter. And at the roadside encounter, they found an issue with one of the brakes. There was excess wear on one of the brake pads. So that goes beyond the minimum wear requirements. And then there was an immediate prohibition. Alongside that, they marked the prohibition S. So S marking, we talk about that a lot. I think it's widely misunderstood, S marking. But S marking indicates that in their opinion, in that moment, there's been a serious failing of your compliance systems, which was something we can maybe discuss because I had some thoughts on it and I disagreed with the examiner's decision at that moment, not with the prohibition itself, but with the S marking. Was there a way to know about that prohibition? And our argument was, no, there wasn't. But I appreciate they have to make that decision on the day. So that was what started it all. And then the wheels are in motion from that point. Knowing what we know and what I'd like most of the listeners to know is if you do receive an immediate prohibition, particularly if it's S marked, that is likely to put in motion these steps, which we'll go through in the podcast. So it's to know that something's coming down the road and you need to do something about it now.
Yeah, okay. So with it being an S mark prohibition, it sounds like your challenge was that you weren't to know that those brakes were beyond worn. Is that your challenge with it? That
was it. They put it S mark prohibition on the driver, and I think the reason they did that was because they would expect to see a warning light on the dashboard, which is true. And a lot of trucks, most trucks, will have a warning on the dashboard to warn you of low brake pads, but that warning wasn't there on our vehicle. So I think the examiner made the assumption it was there when in fact it wasn't there. And that comes to a technical fault with the caliper itself. But yeah, there was no way for the driver to know. And the driver being the operator, had he known, he wouldn't have taken it out.
Of course. And therein lies something quite interesting, because isn't the duty on the examiner to actually check the dashboard to see if it is lit?
Well, I would have thought so. But I think this is where the confusion around S marking comes along, that sometimes they just think if it's a very serious thing, they S mark it.
Okay.
Maybe they don't fully understand what it means. And I see this all the time. It's a lesson in the way they label these things. S marking is not clear what it means. And even in the exam with the students, we're constantly coming up against this. It means a failing of a system that should have prevented it. It doesn't mean the actual severity of the defect itself.
Okay.
So that's a real key point with S marking. It's the worst possible outcome. It will trigger a whole load of things when it's S marked that it maybe otherwise wouldn't. But it's a judgment on your systems rather than a judgment on your defect.
Amazing. Okay, really appreciate your feedback with that. So this has happened, and no doubt you took some action, obviously, but you were also anticipating some contact later down the line, no doubt, from the OTC based on the outcome there. So when you first received the letter, how did you feel?
I mean, it's always painful because you immediately go to, this is my failing. Like, how did I let this happen, and what happened here? Because you get the phone call from the operator, I've been pulled in, I've got this, and then your heart sinks because you know everything that's coming down the line. So I think it was, I was a little bit surprised at first because it's not the kind of place where we are casual with, especially things like brakes. The maintenance is done, and we have inspections and the brake testing and everything. So it's just trying to get to the bottom of what happened. I did do an investigation almost that day, started it. And then I found out all these things about the caliper and why the warning didn't go off. And I was able to send all that to the traffic commissioner. And that would be one piece of advice I would give to people, is that you really need to get into it now. Don't wait to be told by somebody that you need to find out what happened, figure out what happened. And my thinking was, if I can get that off quick enough, or, thoroughly enough, that might prevent the need for any action. It probably won't, because there are automatic wheels in motion, but it does stand you in better stead further down the line when they come back over this as evidence. So yeah, it's painful, but.
And one of my challenges with the letters is how strongly worded they are. Did that, and obviously I've never had the experience of that aimed at me. Did it feel, because you'll have had letters before, no doubt, that you've seen with operators that you've supported, that it must feel different when you know that it's you, right?
It does. It's strange that it does, but it does. You can work with clients and be more detached, but when it's you really take it. I certainly did personally, like it's almost like a personal attack. And the wording, I've always had a problem with the strength of the wording. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I know why they do it, because they do want people to appreciate the seriousness. So yeah, the wording is very strong, and it does make you feel small. It does bring you back down to earth, because you think you've done everything right, and there's some problem they found. Okay.
And I suppose prior to you getting the letter, you'll have had did you have a desk-based assessment? Did you have an in-person visit from the DVSA as part of that investigation process? Was that prior to the letter received? And what was that process like?
Yeah, so the timeline of events was, we got the prohibition in October. We got a phone call in either January or early February following, so a few months later, to say they want to come and do a maintenance investigation. So this was a phone call rather than a letter, and so we agreed a date with them to come and do the maintenance investigation, and then we had the wait for the maintenance investigation, which was February. Then about a month later, it was quite a delay in receiving that final report. But the maintenance investigation we thought went reasonably well. It was the report then that came that didn't paint us in the best light. And I had some issues with this report as well, the quality of it, the accuracy, things like that. And then, so that was February, getting the report sort of late March, got the letter in June for the public inquiry, which was held in August. So that's the timeline. You're looking at almost a year from the event to when maybe the conclusion happens.
And without asking you to overshare or anything like that, but no doubt that must have had a real impact with such a drawn out process. That must have had a long-term impact on your well-being and your health, so to speak, because you're so stressed about it.
It really did. And given how much experience I've had with public inquiries now, having been to probably between 12 and 15 over time, you would think it gets less, but it really weighs heavy. And I was okay between the prohibition and hearing from DVSA, because I thought everything was, as good as it could be. I was okay after the investigation. It was when I got the letter that painted the investigation in a poor light, or relatively. that I started to feel the pressure. And then when the letter landed for the public inquiry, that was when I just could not get it out of my head, really. Most days I go on these long walks and I'd be sort of running it over in my head and just unable to think about anything else. And it's unpleasant for the family as well, because I'm just constantly focused on this thing.
Yeah, I can imagine it's consumed you over the last sort of recent period.
Yeah, definitely.
Which naturally it would do. Tom, so you had some challenge from so the maintenance visit that the DVSA did. If we just quickly touch on that, then, so the maintenance visit that the DVSA did, at the time of the visit, it felt like okay, it felt fine, but actually the report that was then written, did you feel it misrepresented how that visit went? And I don't mean to ask a leading question. It sounds like I am. I kind of semi-know the answer, but you know what I'm asking.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I do hear this from a lot of operators, and I've seen it in the past where your interaction in person seems to be okay because you give them everything they need. They talk about things on the day. It's always difficult because you're under pressure, but it's when the report comes through that it seems vastly different to what you experience. So, I did feel the report, to me, and without naming any individuals involved, it just felt like it was rushed. The report was put on the back burner. Obviously, it needed to be returned to the operator. I don't know if they have a timescale for that, but it felt like it was 2 and 3 lines, paint the worst possible picture. Very subjective in a lot of what it said, very heavily based on opinion rather than actual evidence-based, because being objective takes more effort and more time. So I didn't feel the report was a great representation of my experience on the day. I know they would have found things that were wrong, but I didn't feel like they balanced it very well.
Brilliant. Okay, and so let's sort of fast forward to the public inquiry. What were your expectations before you went in? What were you expecting, and then how did that really compare to the reality when you went in?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question, because I like to know. There are certain outcomes. The traffic commissioners have these powers: the curtailment, the suspension, the revocation. And by a bit of experience and a bit of reading about what they put in their statutory documents, you can piece together what you expect. And there's certain things they can do and certain things they can't do. And it has to be fair, and it has to be proportional, and it has to be balanced. And my faith is always with the traffic commissioners. In my experience, that always does happen. They do a fairly good job of balancing good points against the bad, and they come up with some action. So I thought I'd put it at the kind of low to moderate category, which is their official kind of statutory guidance, contains these categories like severe, moderate, low. And based on that, it leads you on to the action. So at the lower end, you've got things like curtailment. In the midsection, you've got suspension. And in the most serious cases, you've got revocation. So I estimated it at low to moderate. And it turned out that they judged it as moderate to serious. So I sort of underestimated where I thought, and there's probably my biases doing that, because I think, well, I've done a really good job here. I've tried to cover all the evidence. We've sorted all the problems. So that was a little bit of a surprise on the day in terms of the severity, but what actually the outcome I predicted in the worst case was what happened. So there was a short curtailment of a vehicle that didn't have too much impact. And that was kind of what I was expecting at the worst case. I was hoping we might get away with just like formal warnings, but there had to be some action based on the severity, is what the traffic commissioner said to us.
Hi, I'm Shani from Flagship Partners. We're proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast, your go-to source for all things fleet management. If you're looking for expert advice or high-quality training for your fleet business, make Flagship Partners your first choice. We're also thrilled to announce the launch of our Fleet Academy, designed to support and develop future fleet leaders through expert-led and career-focused training. Our offering includes fully accredited courses such as the Transport Manager CPC training, CPC refresher courses, OLAT training, plus ongoing mentoring, support and professional development beyond the qualification. Our vision is simple: to develop elite fleet professionals who drive excellence across the industry. Let's shape the future of our fleet management together.
Brilliant. Okay. So can you walk us through the day? What was it like? Because a lot of people listening to this won't have been to a PI. So could you just sort of illustrate it as best you can from a step approach?
So every public inquiry I've ever done, unless I'm just there for observing, has always meant not sleeping well the night before, because the weight of it just carries. You get given a time and a location, and you have to be there half an hour before. So it might be 10 a.m. in Cambridge traffic office, and they give you the advice to turn up with your ID. And a lot of operators think this is just like an exploratory meeting with the traffic commissioner where we're going to figure out what needs to happen. And that's the very worst way to look at it. What they're looking to do on the day is make a judgment of where you are right now, and take some action and make a decision on that day about what your future is. So that day is not the day to leave it. So hopefully you're feeling prepared, and I was feeling prepared. So you get to the inquiry building, and we went in about 20:09 for a 10 o'clock start, and then you sit in the waiting room. You meet the clerk, they take your ID, they explain the basic procedure, and then you just wait to be called in to the inquiry room. When you get called in, the first thing that you do have to do is obviously stand up. Be clear on your matters of address for the traffic commissioner. So are you going to say sir, ma'am, commissioner? There's a level of respect you need to be clear on, and the clerk will tell you what those methods are. And then the traffic commissioner will introduce themselves and start the proceedings. And they start with an introduction of why they're here. So they establish who the parties are in the room, including the witnesses, what the reason for the public inquiry is. And in our case, we had DVSA there as well, that he was called up for evidence giving of his report. So he was the first one that the traffic commissioner spoke to after the introduction. And she spent actually quite a significant amount of time cross-examining this DVSA examiner. And I think that was based on what she'd seen in his report. Wasn't particularly clear. Similar things I'd said about the quality of the reporting. And I made quite significant representations about that report. So she did cross-examine based on a lot of my points, which I was quite pleased with, because those were things I needed answers to.
Sure. So did it feel like your representation had been properly read prior to the inquiry?
100%. I was really impressed, because that is not always my experience or feelings. But this, having written it myself, I know every word that was in it, and it seemed like she read it, and she did a great job of going through it and asking the questions that actually I wanted to ask. The other thing she said based on those representations was she didn't need to sit me in the witness box, which is normally what they would do. So following DVSA, I was expecting to be called into the witness stand, but she said due to my representations, she was happy that she understood everything she needed to. Right. So I didn't need to sit there, which was quite a relief in a way, because then you really sat in the firing line. But that was nice, and a kind of a compliment in a way of the work.
It sounds like you should take it as such.
I was pleased that she read
detailed in the representation everything that the traffic commissioner would have expected to have seen, which is good.
And that was
brilliant. So she's cross-examined the DVSA professional. What next? What then happens?
So then we were given the opportunity to cross-examine that DVSA examiner as well. And she asked the operator if he wanted to, and she asked the transport manager myself if I wanted to. And I took the time to cross-examine the DVSA.
Were you prepared for that?
Yes, because I knew that should have been. I wasn't sure if, given the situation, if I would be allowed to. It's like a conflict of interest to do that, because there's differences between witnesses and what's called advocates. But I was given the opportunity because I'm the transport manager, and it's only fair to establish the evidence I can. So that was really good to do that, and it's quite intimidating. And I don't know that I'd done it to that level before, but I was actually really pleased with. Thankfully, I had questions prepared, and I was able to go through them and get answers. But I think I was doing that for about 45 minutes, cross-examining this.
And the traffic commissioner didn't rush you, or you were given, there was at no point going, have you finished questions yet, Mr. Reddy? That sort of thing.
I did feel a pressure, but I think it was self-inflicted to kind of get on with it. But the traffic commissioner didn't at any point really interrupt. There was one question I asked when I was trying to establish the answer to something in the maintenance investigation, and the examiner would not answer my question. It was kind of, we were skirting around. It was to do with integrity. The question in the last question of the investigation is, did the transport manager show integrity? And probably for obvious reasons, I was quite keen to establish that I did. And in his investigation, he didn't state that I did. So I was questioning him in the inquiry on this. And the traffic commissioner was quite happy to let me do that, because I really did push the point on this. And he wouldn't yield it in the end. He wouldn't do it. He was going on the technicalities of the wording of the question. But from my perspective and the traffic commissioner's perspective, he hadn't answered the question.
Right. Okay.
And it was good to be able to do that. It made the point that there was something missing there, and I think that was important to do it.
Right. Okay. So, so this is a really interesting point. So, did you ask the traffic commissioner if they were satisfied with the answer provided then, or did they just agree that you'd asked it and they'd not really answered the question? If that makes sense.
I think the final statement was, I think we've established the extent of the answer that can give to that question. So,
right. Okay.
I think that was the wording of it.
Yeah. Okay. And just that, I know it's probably a difficult question to answer, but did it feel like it was an egotistical thing that he wasn't willing to admit that you had integrity?
There was a bit of a battle of wills there. I think there was a little bit of
which is ego, right?
That's ego. That gets in the way, doesn't it? And there's lots of lessons in this for me, in that I need to take the learning from it. The mistakes I have made genuinely. But if things like integrity and honesty are really important to me, and it's important to have those on the record as being a good thing, so it really felt important to me to go at this. But ultimately, if you're asking someone a question, they don't want to answer it in the way you want them to. There's only so many ways you can ask that question.
Sure, yeah.
But I think by doing it, I was sort of somehow challenging these like lawyers on these TV shows that we see. And we're saying, Mr. X, can you tell me why you did this? And can you tell me the meaning of this? Somehow I was channeling some of that. So I did feel assertive in that moment. That was really good, actually. And I think that was the really valuable experience for me to feel some justice was being done for both sides.
You must have felt empowered to be able to do that, which I suppose is admirable of our system, that there is that opportunity to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's really important. That's why I always have faith in the traffic commissioners, separate from the DVSA, that you will have your day in court, as it is the tribunal. You get to speak on your behalf and give your side of the story. Ultimately, the traffic commissioner will decide at the end what they think, but you get to have your say, and they have to take it into account. And that's what we mean by that word, representations. It has a very significant meaning, and the more detail you put into those representations, the better it potentially will reflect.
So one of the before I move on to the next question, there was something you said that was interesting there, Tom, that I just want to pick up on because I'm worried I'll lose it, and I think the listeners will probably be wondering. You said that you're comfortable with the mistakes you'd made, but obviously you were keen to ensure that honesty and integrity were important for you. With regards to mistakes, are you happy to share potentially some of the mistakes you've made?
I think it's really important, because there's a temptation with all of this to go, this is wildly unjust. This shouldn't have happened. This is not fair. Woe is me sort of approach. But if you have generally dropped the ball on something and not done something that you'd otherwise should have done, it's important to learn from it, because this is the opportunity to be human and learn from these mistakes. And the system allows for it as well. It's all built around these kind of human condition. So I made some fairly significant mistakes with brake testing, which is particularly embarrassing for me, given how much I spend a focus on this. Sure. But this was based on information received from other parties, and this was going to be some of the important thing to take away. Those other parties will not be in the public inquiry. You will be. Yeah. So if you've been advised to do something, whether that's by, your maintenance provider, the supplier of the equipment, Facebook groups, or your peers, they're not the ones who are going to have to answer for it. And so I was given the advice that you could use a Beaumont decelerometer tester in the certain way that we were using it, and you can't by the letter of the guidance. And I knew that of the guidance, but I was also trusting in the suppliers of the equipment, and actually the training course we did with Urtec, which advised us of the same thing. Wow. And I tried to get witness statements from those two parties, and both of them refused to give. And I think that's very telling about what they were willing to help with or not. And I should have known better in terms of the guide to roadworthiness says this is what we're going to do. But we had particular challenges with our location as well, for reasons of doing the brake testing in this way. And that was my job to know that, and I should have known it. And I think I should have pushed harder is the real lesson for me. I think sometimes I'm too easygoing with things, and that I know to be wrong, and I sort of go along with it because it's trying to people please or make it a little bit easier for me. I think you really have to understand how much this job requires you to be potentially in combat with people's opinions about things, and you have to push back.
Yeah. Okay. It's difficult, isn't it? Because actually being combative doesn't come naturally to many people. In fact, most people I know that have integrity and are honest and are decent people tend to avoid conflict as much as possible and do tend to people please, which I know I'm also guilty of. So it's very easy. It's very easy to do. Maybe there's a whole other podcast on like people pleasing with TM, right? So maybe there's a whole other thing, because it does lead to some challenges. And isn't it frightening? I think, just to comment, that Beaumont, the manufacturer, and Airtech, from a training perspective, both advocate for the use of this equipment, and it doesn't meet the requirements of the GTMR.
Yeah,
and won't back it up.
Right. So the first email I sent to Beaumont was because I'm a customer of Beaumont. I have their equipment. I have done for 15 years or more. So they're like, oh, we will always help our customers. And then I gave the context in a subsequent email. We're going in front of a traffic commission with this. We need this statement to say this is why we've done this. And then it was radio silence from that point. I think I did get a reply quoting some DVSA guidance back, which we'd already know. It didn't answer the question. And it was specifically to do with the vehicle type. So just to be clear for the listeners, you can use a Beaumont in certain circumstances on certain vehicles, but it's not a blanket permission. And maybe this is a focus for future, because they are pushing very hard to sell this stuff based on the new requirements. You'll see a lot of emails land in your inbox. The guide has changed. Use this equipment to meet the requirements of brake testing. And I get why they're doing that, because they're trying to sell the equipment. And
sure.
Airtech as well, you'd expect them to be clearer. But ultimately, you're just dealing with a human being who thinks they know what they know at the time, and you'll get good and bad. And it is no reflection on the standard, but it just shows you the gaps that you can leave yourself open to.
Really, really interesting. Really interesting. Okay, so there's already there's really valuable learnings there, isn't there, around the opportunity to cross-examine is really interesting. The opportunity to learn from the mistakes, the what you're saying there about not like taking on face value what that actually your training could be wrong, that actually the manufacturer of the equipment could be wrong. Really, really, really valuable there. So I appreciate that, Tom. Thank you. So my next question then was, how formal, during the inquiry, how formal did the setting feel, and how did the traffic commissioner come across during your session?
Right. So if you've never been to a public inquiry, the formality might surprise people because it is extremely formal. If you've never been to a court, then you won't have experienced that level. So magistrates court may be more commonly experienced, Crown Court hopefully not, but both of those settings would give you the idea of how these things are played out. Now, we don't have the wigs and the gowns and all that, but you're wearing a suit, you stand when the traffic commissioner enters and leaves the room, and you address them as sir or ma'am or commissioner. And these basic things come quite natural to me, being in the military from age 17. But if you've never dealt with that, your natural instinct is not to say sir or ma'am to people. At least I don't think it is. So you need to be aware of that, because it reflects directly on your character in a way, that you are able to give people respect, because it's not the person we're respecting, it's the rank or the position, if you like. We have to respect the commissioner's position because of what they have to do. So the formality is very formal, and it's stressful. We were waiting a long time in there in silence for the commissioner to return with the decision. And I think it was 20 minutes, and I could count every second of those minutes, because it's not the kind of thing where you can just have a bit of banter with the people next to you. It's the witnesses over here, myself and the operator here, and the public behind, and you just sit in the silence. And you got sweat coming down your head, and it's quite warm, and all of this kind of thing. So it does feel the pressure in there.
Definitely. Okay, and did you have anyone from the public? Did you have any public people in there to oversee?
There was one member of the public, and then there was a relation of the operator as well. So it was essentially a member of the public sat in the back, but just there for kind of moral support. I do push with all my students, go to a public inquiry. It's public. It's in the interest of the public in most cases for them to be run. If they can't have you in the room for financial moments, they'll say that, and you'll be asked to leave. But for the most part, go and see how these things go down, because you won't be asked anything. You just sit in the back in the chair, and you just see how proceedings go. But a lot of them, unless it's some major public interest, like a planning thing for an operating centre, or maybe a bus service that's not running very well, most of the time there won't be that many public in there.
Fantastic. I think that's a really valuable point, because going to experience it, I think, is probably a good part of the CPD of a transport manager, actually, to understand that. And I think it puts a lot of context on things as well, doesn't it? The context of the license, the context of the operator license, and that as well. So, Tom, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this part 1 of the podcast. So I think there's some fantastic learnings. Thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to next week's podcast where we're going to go into part 2.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining me, and really appreciate it. I think the listeners will have got lots of value from that first part of the podcast.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.